Hi everyone, RFG here with a review for Crypt Custodian, a top-down action-adventure game developed and published by Kyle Thompson and also published by Top Hat Studios. Available on PC, PS4, 5, Switch, and Xbox Series consoles. Beginning as a newly awakened ghost cat, Pluto, who was soon dubiously forced to be a janitor by the guardian of the Afterlife, the frog Kendra, you'll spend a good amount of time in combat, platforming, and solving puzzles. So how did Pluto end up in this situation? You're woken by another ghost cat named Pip, who informs you that all beings who recently joined the Afterlife are judged by Kendra to decide whether you belong in the palace or outside of the palace. When looking over Pluto's history, things start looking positive, but smashing some statues with your newly acquired broom when you were just awakened puts you on the bad list, and are now in charge of cleaning up the outside. That means traversing through the pretty large map, getting new general abilities to access new areas, and upgrades for the many battles you'll face. Pluto's initial moveset consists of a dodge, jump, melee attack, and jump attack. You'll gradually and somewhat quickly gain general abilities used for puzzles on combat such as an air dash and being able to use your broom as a boomerang, usually after boss fights. But you'll also have the chance to buy and find upgrades and special attacks. Garbage is the currency you'll collect to use in the Sinner's Inn, the game's shop and one of the first locations you'll visit outside of the palace. The upgrades can vary by adding extra passive bonuses to Pluto like an extra health container, or add buffs to your attacks. Special attacks are usable when the vessel meter next to Pluto's health is filled. These special attacks can surround you with brooms to attack enemies, or attack all enemies on screen. You can only equip one special attack at a time, but the number of upgrades you can equip are based on upgrade points you earn throughout your adventure. These upgrade points are gained in several different ways. They can be gained by finding a chest that puts you in a battle challenge scenario. These battles require you to defeat a certain number of enemies without taking damage, but they do let you know how many enemies need to be fought at the bottom of the screen, and you can retry these immediately if you fail. Another way to earn upgrade points is by taking curses. Curses can be found throughout the environments and put you into disadvantaged scenarios where you have to defeat a number of enemies before you're placed back in a normal state and receive your upgrade point. You can also find upgrade points on the map, usually in timed platforming sections. Most of the platforming done in Crypt Custodian isn't too demanding, but these specific sections have short timers attached to them to unlock the upgrade point, but these can be retried immediately. You can usually take the platforming and puzzle solving at your own pace with certain timing requirements placed depending on the type of puzzle and platform section, but combat generally moves faster. You won't always see this in general parts of the map where you see enemies, but it's there in the battle challenges and boss battles. What's really important about these situations isn't just how quick the battles can move, but how important dodging is in these encounters. You don't get a health refill ability. Instead, your health is refilled after certain battles and at save points. Dealing damage quickly and reacting to enemy attacks is equally important since you don't have a basic safety in the middle of a fight. Fortunately, your standard melee attack is quick and attacking continuously is fast. Your special attacks also activate quickly, but more importantly, your dash provides a good amount of reactivity and invincibility, and your jump and air dash are equally responsive and good for evading attacks. Your general abilities, including the ones gained by defeating bosses, are useful in multiple situations, but the upgrades and special attacks you can gain are equally useful and can serve multiple playstyles or supplement them. Of course, some of these are not so simple to access, but it shows the amount of well thought out map and level design. There's rarely a moment where you'll see an inaccessible area and be completely left in the dark on how to access it. Part of that stems from years of game experience, but it's also a case of how the game is designed from a general progression standpoint. Gaining access to traversal and puzzle solving abilities early on let me know that I was never too far off from gaining access to something to help me on my quest. But one critique I have is that sometimes hitting a switch doesn't provide an indication of what's been activated. Those save points are placed at a reasonable distance from each other and aren't placed far enough from situations where you might need to travel back to. The map design itself also deserves credit. Not only is it detailed enough to where you can gain a familiarity of a specific location, but it also makes it fairly clear on what areas you may have already visited but couldn't finish exploring. Having access to a quick return to save point option is also just a nice quality of life feature to have. The areas and map are already designed well in terms of understanding progression, but they're also pleasing to the eye. Each area, even when directly connected to another, is visually distinct from each other. Standard enemies share their own design similarities that are somewhat based on the areas, but are still different enough to where you can easily identify and reassociate their attacks. Bosses, however, have some very varied designs, with some bosses that are just downright creepy. Characters themselves share similar design motifs with each other, such as the animal theming and their blue tinge with the exception of Pluto, but still have their own personality and tends to match their individual stories. The story itself starts off simple and largely remains that way, but it does grow, and your goals along with the goals of your friends you make in your adventure become more than just surviving in the afterlife. Despite the dark nature, it's enjoyable to go through. Music is fine overall, but at times it feels like certain tracks in the overworld are too short or cuts off abruptly even within the same room or space. Battle themes are a highlight though. Sound effects do give you a good notice of when an attack is incoming, you take damage, a switch has been used, etc. I've mentioned that save points are usually placed carefully or at fair distances from each other, but the game isn't a complete cakewalk. Limiting when you can refill your health, especially in longer battles, does add a decent level of challenge. Nothing feels unfair, but I think some battles might require a learning curve or a few tries to beat. I do think some of the curse conditions could use an adjustment though. Some of the curses you get felt oddly placed. They all require a certain number of enemies to be defeated, but sometimes they're put in locations where there's a lack of enemies to beat, so you're holding onto a curse longer than what feels necessary. That being said, the game's very forgiving in other ways. Most sense of progress you make is carried over in depth. I don't think a large portion of players would have trouble making their way through the game. Crypt Custodian has a lot to offer in the top-down action-adventure genre. An enjoyable story with likable characters, solid combat, and puzzles, and platforming, well-designed areas with nicely paced progression, good boss design, and a decent but ultimately fair challenge all make for a well-rounded entry. There are also collectibles and some post-game content for those interested. I recommend Crypt Custodian for anyone who's into the action-adventure or Metroidvania genres. But that's it for me. Let me know what you think below. Thanks. Bye.